You're playing Baldur's Gate 3 and you absolutely love it so far. However, it seems to be missing something. Super Saiyans. Well, perhaps it's not missing those anymore. Today we're going to be covering a build guide video for monks that's really going to fill that niche for you. We're going to try to stay true to this as much as we can as we make this build and as we play it in the game, just for the RP and the fantasy aspect. First off, you'll notice that I, of course, went with some spiky hair. On top of that, I do have a sword. Trunks had a sword, so I feel like this is fair game. I'm not dual wielding. I'm just using a single sword. Again, I feel like this is legit. For actions, at level 1 monk, we're going to get Flurry of Blows, and this is a bonus action. This is actually fairly strong at level 1. It allows you to punch twice in quick succession. This means you can take your regular action, for example, a melee attack, and then also use this bonus action to get additional attacks in the same turn. Extremely strong at level 1. Not many classes have the option to do multiple attacks this early in the game. Class features, we're going to use our ki. And on top of this, we're going to have unarmored defense. We're basically going to get an additional wisdom modifier to our armor class. This gets very powerful. Martial arts, dexterous attacks. This is going to allow our unarmed attacks to scale with dexterity instead of strength, if our dexterity is higher. And for the character build we're using, it will be. Essentially what this is going to do is allow you to not have to need your strength for very much of anything other than, say, jumping or carrying weight. This allows us to stack dexterity more and get solid benefit out of it. Martial arts, deft strikes. Attacks with monk weapons and unarmed attacks deal 1 to 4 bludgeoning damage unless their normal damage is higher. This actually scales, so don't be alarmed by the 1 to 4 damage. This will scale up as you level. Bonus unarmed strike. After making an attack with a monk weapon or while unarmed, you can make another unarmed attack as a bonus action. Again, very powerful. This sticks with us for the entire game. Allows us to, say, attack with our sword and then follow up with an unarmed attack. For ability scores, we're going to use our modifiers to acquire 17 dex and 15 wisdom. Yes, these are odd numbers. When we get our first feat at level 4, we're going to pump an additional point into dex and an additional point into wisdom. And keep in mind that we get armor class modifiers from both of these, meaning at level 4, you're going to gain a 2 AC bonus. Now, the reason that we have Constitution buffed here is just to increase our hit points. It's going to help with some saving throws as well. But in general, we want to be essentially tanky for this. This is actually my frontline character, believe it or not, and this character has so much avoidance and ways to mitigate damage. It just becomes incredibly powerful. I was absolutely shocked. At first, I thought I was going to be building an assassin type character, and I basically transitioned this into a frontline tank, allowing me to kind of use whatever I like in the backline and just prioritize damage, utility, and so forth from the other characters. The reason we have extra points in strength, even though we're going to use dexterity as the main stat, is again for carrying weight as well as the ability to jump, just adding to our mobility, and this character is incredibly mobile. For skill proficiencies, as is my typical recommendation, I recommend going with things that you're going to have solid benefit from your stats here. So I choose acrobatics, and on top of that, I like the athletics, and this is just because, again, we're going to be in that front line, and I do have some strength at 12 at the moment. This just prevents you to get some saving throws and stay on your feet rather than getting knocked over, because you're often going to be surrounded by several mobs or more. So it's nice to have this and be able to kind of stay remaining standing and not be susceptible to all of this crowd control. At level 2, we don't actually have any choices to make as a monk. We just get the defaults here, and that's fine. They're actually pretty strong. We're going to get an additional key point as well as unarmored movement, which is going to increase our movement by 3 meters. On top of that, we get a whole bunch of other nice utility and mobility skills. First one for mobility is going to be Step of the Wind Dash. Double your movement speed, and jump no longer requires a bonus action. Very powerful, right? We're adding 3 meters to our movement speed, and we have the ability to double it, as well as causing jump not to take a bonus action. Disengage. Retreat to safety by disengaging. Jump no longer requires a bonus action. Very, very handy. The number of times I've used this with 4 or 5 enemies around me to just completely walk out unscathed, jump away from all of the enemies, and avoid all damage the next turn is tremendous. Very, very strong. Make sure that you're utilizing both of these. Absolutely adds to that tankiness of this character, allows you for additional survivability, and just makes it even more powerful. Back to the first one here, Patient Defense. This does get used. It's not the strongest ability, in my honest opinion, but it does have situational use. Attacks against you have disadvantage, and you have advantage on dexterity saving throws. This costs your bonus action, and it only lasts for 1 turn. Also costs a key point. So keep that in mind, and like I said, I have certainly used this, but it's really a niche choice here. If I'm completely out of range of targets, which is really rare, or if I just have nothing going on, pre-buffing, that kind of thing, then you have the ability to use this. Other than that, you'll most likely be using the dash as well as the disengage far more often. At level 3, we're going to gain a lot, and this is our first fairly large power spike for the monk class. For our race, we're going to get the psionics jump, triple a creature's jumping distance. This is just going to kind of add up to what we already have, and since we have a little bit in strength, our jump is actually fairly decent. And on top of that, we can choose to use our dash or another ability like that, the disengage, that allows us to essentially cast jump without using a bonus action on that turn, so we get a lot of use out of this. For subclass, all three of these are actually viable. For the RP factor of this class, we're actually going to play Way of the Four Elements, and again, if you want to play something else, you could, and I could see how all of these sort of fit into the RP aspect, but I find this one the most fitting, and honestly, Monk is a strong class. Any of these choices are going to allow you to get through the game without any real issue. Now, we're going to take Fangs of the Fire Snake. This is a really nice spell. This is going to hit our foe from afar, and this has a surprisingly decent range to it. On top of that, since this class is so mobile and we have the ability to just position ourselves wherever we really want without too much danger, we have relatively good saving throws since we have fairly high statistics in 4 of the 6 categories. And on top of this, just the additional movement speed we get, the number of mobility tools that we have, whether it be through our class or a race, just add up and allow us to basically get into a position where we can use this and cast it as a range attack, and then use our additional movement on that same turn or mobility skill to get into range of the target from a melee perspective and follow up with our unarmed strike from the monk class. So we actually can double dip on this, making use of that additional fire damage all in the same turn. So this is very powerful, and that's why I like this one. Fist of Unbroken Air. First of all, knockbacks in general in this game are incredibly powerful if you're using terrain to your advantage, which you should be. These can do tremendous amounts of damage. They could knock enemies off of platforms, making it several turns sometimes for them to even get back into the engagement, or other times it just kills them outright. Fist of Unbroken Air not only knocks them back 6 meters, it makes them prone, and it does fairly large damage for a knockback skill, so I absolutely love this. A final skill I like to use is Spear of Elemental Balance. It just allows you to create surfaces and interact with other players of your class and so forth, but there are some other decent choices here. If you want to take another knockback, you could take Fist of Four Thunders. You can also get this through your Illithid powers, so keep that in mind when you're designing your character or using your respec. And again, some other options here as well, but I really feel that Spear of Elemental Balance is the most well-rounded choice in this case. You have the ability to select which type of damage you want to deal with this skill, and I find that really nice, because as you get through the game and progress, there's going to be enemies with resistances, and it's nice to have different options of what type of damage you want to deal to the target to get the most out of your use. Now, these are going to cost key points as opposed to spell charges, and keep in mind that Fist of Unbroken Air costs 2, Elemental Balance costs 2, and Fangs of the Fire Snake costs 1. So you have an option, even if you're down to 1 point, getting the Fangs of the Fire Snake off, which is really no slouch, honestly. At level 4, we have the ability to replace a spell, which we're not going to do this time, but more importantly, we get our feet. On top of that, for class features, an additional key point, as well as slow fall. Now when you fall, you can use your reaction to gain resistance to falling damage. Just a very nice benefit. Like I said, there's a number of ways not only for you to knock enemies off, but they can knock you off as well. This again adds to your survivability, being in the middle of everything, allowing you to position yourself a little more aggressively and not have to worry so much about your survivability. For feats, we're going to take the ability improvement, and we're going to go into Dex as well as Wisdom. That's going to make these even numbers, as well as give us a 2 armor class bonus just from this level. Incredibly strong power spike for us at this point. Now at level 5, you're going to gain a couple of things. First off, you're going to get an additional attack for being the monk class, and second, you're going to get access to Stunning Strike. This is an ability that can stun the target for 1 turn and basically leave it set up for the rest of your party to nuke that target. My plans for this character as I continue to level is to start stacking things like lightning charge gear and essentially have this character be a lightning bolt running into the enemy, the middle of everything, just dispersing lightning while dealing out damage and surviving everything at the same time. Your race choice is completely flexible. I prefer Githyanki, and this has to do with the racial abilities having the Psionics Jump as well as the Psionics Misty Step. They just really add to the dynamics of this build, allowing you to get around even more so. Now for some items that I found very early in the game, I figured I would share these that synergize really well with the build. First is a pair of boots that increase your jumping distance. Again, at this point you should know how that's going to benefit you. Bracers of Defense. This is going to increase your armor bonus by 2 as long as you're not wearing armor or holding a shield, which we will not be. And a couple of rings. One is going to proc momentum when we're below 50% hit points and begin our turn. Momentum is going to increase your movement speed. Crusher's Ring is also going to increase your movement speed, so you can see that I have the ability to travel very, very far, jump very far, teleport through the Misty Step at level 5, and this build just allows you to get around the battlefield as much as you would like, and even go into the middle of things, survive the hits, deal with anything coming your way, and get back out alive. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch, and have a great day.